February 19, 1945, 7:43 in the morning, southeast coast of Iwo Jima, Volcano Islands, Pacific Ocean, approximately 1,200 kilometers south of Tokyo. The air reeked of volcanic sulfur mixed with cordite from 3 consecutive days of naval bombardment. The black sand beneath combat boots felt like ground glass, volcanic ash so fine it penetrated every seam, every fold of uniform. Waves crashed with that mechanical regularity of the Pacific, while hundreds of landing vehicles tracked, formed a line 3,200 meters from shore, diesel engines roaring in unison that made stomachs vibrate. Sergeant Thomas Edward Mitchell, 24 years old, 28th Regiment Marines, 5th Division, squeezed and released the stock of his M1 Garand rifle at 4-second intervals. His fingers left sweat marks on the metal even in the February cold. Around him, 68 amphibious vehicles carried the first wave, 1,360 men who in exactly 17 minutes would be under the most concentrated fire American Marines had faced in 169 years of Corps history. Mitchell had survived Tarawa 26 months earlier, 3 days that killed 1,696 Americans on an island smaller than a golf course. He had learned that shallow water means slow death, that coral cuts to bone, that men scream for their mothers in 7 different languages. But now, something different. In exactly 3 hours and 17 minutes, 30,000 Marines would be on the beach, the largest amphibious landing on a single front in Pacific history. They would establish a record no Japanese commander thought possible, cut the island in half in less than 1 day, isolate Mount Suribachi, advance 700 meters inland while there was still daylight. The enemy had never considered, never managed to internalize until that specific moment of February 19th, that Americans possessed something beyond material superiority. They had blood-bought experience from Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Tinian, Peleliu. 5 landings where they learned the beach is only the beginning, but Iwo Jima's defenders had something far more dangerous. 11 miles of tunnels connecting 1,500 fortified positions built during 7 months of non-stop work, commanded by the most innovative general the Japanese Empire ever positioned against American forces. In 36 days, this sulfur island would bury alive approximately 21,000 Japanese defenders, nearly the entire garrison sealed in caves, irradiated by flamethrowers, buried by bombardments that transformed tunnels into collective crematory furnaces. If you want to understand the true cost of 8 square kilometers of volcanic rock, the story that Japanese commanders never predicted is about to begin. To understand why Iwo Jima's defense-in-depth strategy represented such a tactical shock to American intelligence analysts, you need to go back to June 1944, when Prime Minister Hideki Tojo summoned an unknown cavalry officer to defend an island the emperor himself considered indefensible. Traditional Japanese island defense doctrine since 1942 followed the principle called suisei sakusen, destruction in the water operation. Developed after early successes at Wake Island and the Philippines, the philosophy was simple and brutal. Meet the enemy at his most vulnerable moment, when he exits landing craft into shallow water, when he carries 40 kilograms of equipment, when naval artillery cannot distinguish friend from enemy at 50 meters distance. Build reinforced concrete bunkers at the waterline. Position: Type 92 machine guns with overlapping fields of fire covering every square meter of sand. Calibrate 81mm mortars to explode in water at 15 meters from shore. Depth sufficient to drown a wounded man, too shallow for amphibious craft to maneuver. When invaders establish a beachhead, regardless of cost, launch massive banzai counterattack on the first night, with the objective of pushing them back to sea where the tide will take them. At Tarawa in November 1943, this doctrine killed 1,696 Americans in 76 hours, but failed to repel the invasion. At Saipan in June through July 1944, the largest banzai attack of the war, 3,000 Japanese soldiers in a suicidal charge at dawn on July 7th, resulted in near-total annihilation of the attacking force without preventing American capture of the island in less than 1 month. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, veteran of 33 years of service, commander of the Imperial Guard Division in Tokyo, studied each of these failures with an engineer's mentality, not a romantic samurai's. In a staff meeting on June 8, 1944, 1 week before assuming command of Iwo Jima, Kuribayashi declared that beach defenses are convenient targets for warships and banzai attacks are ritual slaughter without military value, stating they would not repeat these errors. Japanese confidence in traditional tactics was not irrational or based on fanaticism. Until mid-1944, no American commander had developed a truly effective response to Japanese fortifications in depth. At Peleliu, from September through November 1944, Marines of the 1st Division took 73 days to clear resistance in a limestone cave system, suffering 9,800 casualties against a garrison of only 11,000 defenders, an attrition rate that, projected on a larger scale, would render invasion of Japan literally impossible without use of atomic weapons. Captured Japanese intelligence documents at Saipan demonstrated that Tokyo possessed precise knowledge of American order of battle, amphibious landing schemes, even radio communication protocols. What they did not capture, what they could not internalize until February 19, 1945, was American doctrinal evolution, combined arms coordination at platoon level, portable M22 flamethrowers with effective range of 20 meters, modified Sherman M4A3R3 tanks with POA-CWS-H5 flamethrowers capable of projecting napalm at 60 meters, and most critically, the psychological willingness to accept 30% casualties to secure strategic objectives. The irony of Japanese preparation at Iwo Jima was that Kuribayashi spent massive resources fortifying against threats he had already declared obsolete. Pressured by Navy Captain Tsunezo Wachi and Admiral Rinosuke Ichimaru, both defenders of traditional coastal defense doctrine, Kuribayashi authorized construction of 135 reinforced concrete pillboxes along 3,200 meters of beaches in the southern sector. Each pillbox consumed 12 tons of concrete, 900 kilograms of reinforcing steel, 320 man-hours of labor. Total cost, 1,620 tons of concrete, 121,500 kilograms of steel, 43,200 hours of specialized labor that could have expanded the northern tunnel system by 2 more miles. American Marines destroyed all 135 positions in the first 3 hours and 40 minutes of D-Day, exactly as Kuribayashi had predicted. Thomas Edward Mitchell was born March 17, 1920, in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, son of William James Mitchell, Canadian veteran of the First World War, who lost his left lung to mustard gas at Ypres in April 1915, and Margaret Ellen Thompson, a nurse who worked at an evacuation hospital in Etaples, France, from 1917 through 1918. Thomas had 2 younger brothers, Robert Henry, 22, serving with the Royal Canadian Navy in the North Atlantic, and Arthur William, 19, training with the Canadian Army at Camp Borden, preparing for European deployment. Thomas's father died in November 1938 from pulmonary fibrosis, a late complication of chlorine gas exposure 23 years earlier. Thomas was 18 when he held his father's hand during the final 6 hours, listening to that sound of broken glass with each breath, promising to finish what his father started. Pre-war profession, lathe operator at Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company in Hamilton, producing components for hydroelectric turbines at $32.50 per week, above average salary that allowed him to support his mother and brothers after his father's death. Education. Completed grade 10 at Central Collegiate Institute, before leaving school at 16 to work full-time after his father developed severe respiratory symptoms. Interrupted aspiration. He wanted to study mechanical engineering at McMaster University in Hamilton, a dream he discussed with his father during long Sunday walks along Hamilton Harbor. Specific hobby, building miniature engines. He had completed a functional 1:4 scale replica of a Pratt & Whitney R1340 Wasp radial engine, working in the basement 3 nights per week for 2 years, each component machined by hand on a lathe his father bought used in 1936. Documented fear, severe claustrophobia since an incident at age 12 when he became trapped in an abandoned mine shaft near Dundas during exploration with friends. Rescued after 4 hours, he described as feeling the earth swallow you alive. Enlistment, December 12, 1941, 5 days after Pearl Harbor, at the U.S. Marine Corps recruiting office in Detroit, Michigan. Thomas crossed the Canadian border specifically to enlist in the Marines because the Royal Canadian Marines had been dissolved in 1923, and he wanted amphibious assault infantry, not regular army. His mother Margaret's reaction: She tried to convince him to wait until he turned 22, finally relented and signed written consent necessary for foreign citizens under 25, writing in a preserved letter that his father fought in mud and gas for 4 years, while Thomas was choosing to storm beaches, stating she did not understand the difference between his bravery and his father's suffering, but would not stop him from finding out. Basic training, 8 weeks at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Paris Island, South Carolina, January through March 1942. Temperature ranged from -2 to 4 Celsius during the first 4 weeks. Damp Atlantic cold that penetrated to bone marrow. Specific difficulty. Confined space combat exercises in weeks 5 and 6 of training. Bunker clearing simulations using sealed gas chambers, where recruits had to remove gas masks, while the instructor released CS in a 3 by 3 meter environment. Thomas vomited violently during the first exercise, refused to enter the chamber on the second day. Drill instructor Staff Sergeant Raymond O'Brien, Guadalcanal veteran who would be killed at Tarawa 9 months later, said war does not care about fear, that the Japanese will bury you in caves and burn you alive, that you either learn to fight underground or die underground. Choose now. Specialization. Selected for demolitions training because rifle qualification scores were only average. 218 of 250 possible at rifle range day, but he demonstrated exceptional mechanical aptitude during field exercises, where he managed to repair an M1917 Browning machine gun with a broken bolt using cannibalized parts from 2 other damaged weapons in less than 8 minutes. Specialized training. 4 weeks at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, April through May 1942, focused on military explosives use, TNT, Composition C2, Bangalore torpedoes, shaped charges. Memorable instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Albert Frank Dawson, 38 years old, veteran of Nicaragua occupation from 1928 through 1932 and Dominican Republic intervention in 1916. Dawson had 3 fingers missing on his left hand, lost in a detonator accident during a training exercise in 1935. The lesson that saved Thomas's life: never trust a fuse timer under stress. Count seconds in your head using the Mississippi method. Your brain works faster scared than any mechanical timer works calm. Mechanics fail, but fear is reliable. First experience under fire. November 20th, 1943. Red Beach 2, Tarawa Atoll, Gilbert Islands, 0817 local time. Thomas was in the 5th landing wave, 85 minutes after the first wave. His Higgins boat grounded on coral reef at 600 yards from beach because tides were calculated incorrectly. Depth was 0.9 meters, when planning assumed minimum 1.2 meters. He had to jump into chest-deep water, carrying 28 kilograms of demolition equipment, plus 14 kilograms of ammunition. It took 23 minutes to traverse 600 yards, Japanese Type 92 machine guns creating crossfire patterns that made water foam like a washing machine. The man to Thomas's left, Private First Class Donald Eugene Parker, 19 years old from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, took 3 7.7mm rounds in the neck and upper chest at 12 minutes into the wade. Thomas tried to hold him, but Parker was 93 kilograms, and the water was 1.1 meters deep at that point. Parker slipped from Thomas's hands, sank, died drowning in his own blood before drowning in salt water. Thomas never forgot the weight. Not of Parker, but of releasing Parker. Progression of demolitions competence, incompetent and terrified at Tarawa, November 20th through 23rd, 1943, where he placed a C2 charge on a bunker without verifying if Japanese ammunition was stored inside, resulting in a secondary explosion that severely wounded 2 Marines from an adjacent unit. Both survived, though one lost his left leg below the knee. Adequate at Saipan, June 15th through July 9th, 1944, where he executed 37 demolitions of fortified positions without incidents, developing a technique of using 2 Bangalore torpedoes in L formation to collapse pillboxes from the flank instead of frontal attack. Proficient at Tinian, July 24th through August 1st, 1944, where he developed a method of using composition C2-shaped charges to seal cave openings without entering, creating internal pressure that killed occupants by asphyxiation within 90 to 120 seconds, a technique that would prove crucial at Iwo Jima. Relationship with comrades. Closest was Corporal James Allen Rodriguez, 23 years old from El Paso, Texas, M22 flamethrower operator who survived Tarawa and Saipan with Thomas. Rodriguez had a specific superstition: never removed his helmet even to sleep, because his older brother died at Kasserine Pass in North Africa, when a mortar fragment penetrated his skull while he slept without protection. At Tinian on the night of July 28, 1944, Rodriguez told Thomas they were not brave, that brave men died at Tarawa in the first 5 minutes, that they were what remained, men too scared to die fast, so they die slow instead. The moral dilemma came on July 31, 1944, approximately 1440 local time, 800 meters north of Tinian town, near the southern slope of what Marines called the Lasso, a complex of interconnected limestone caves occupied by approximately 200 to 300 Japanese soldiers and civilians. Thomas received a specific order from Captain Richard Franklin Walsh, company commander, to use explosives to permanently seal all 11 cave entrances after loudspeakers mounted on jeeps broadcast surrender messages in Japanese for 40 minutes without response. The order violated what Thomas considered a fundamental moral distinction. Killing armed combatants shooting at you is war. Sealing unarmed civilians in caves where they will die of asphyxiation over 2 to 3 days is something different, something English does not have a specific word for, but his Catholic education at St. Patrick's Church in Hamilton taught was mortal sin regardless of military context. Thomas had seen Japanese children being pushed from cliffs at Saipan by their own parents under influence of propaganda, saying Marines would eat children alive. He had witnessed a Japanese civilian woman explode herself with a grenade while holding a baby because a Japanese officer said honor demanded death over capture. Thomas rationalized that if they chose death over surrender, he was just executing their choice faster, that clean explosives were more merciful than slow suffocation. But this connected to something his veteran father said in 1937, when Thomas was 17, discussing why William refused to watch war films. His father said, "War makes you efficient at things that should be impossible, that this efficiency does not leave when war ends, that he could still calculate how many seconds a man takes to drown in mud, did not want that calculation in his head, but it was there permanently like scar tissue on the brain." The conversation with Rodriguez, reconstructed from letters. Setting inside an Amtrak LVT-4 parked 40 meters from the caves, waiting for final order to begin demolition work, 15:20 local time, intense sun, temperature 33 Celsius, smell of volcanic sulfur mixed with decomposition of unburied corpses from 5 days prior. Thomas asked Rodriguez how he lived with burning people who might not even be soldiers. Rodriguez replied he did not live with it, just kept not dying until someone shot him, and the question became someone else's problem. Thomas said that was not an answer. That was cowardice dressed as philosophy. Rodriguez said philosophy meant nothing when Captain Walsh court-martialed you for refusing direct orders, asked if Thomas would tell the firing squad he had moral reservations. Thomas said his old man said, "Killing changes you permanently," said the math stays in your head. Rodriguez said his old man was right, but they were already changed. Tarawa changed them. The only question now was whether they survived long enough to regret it. The final rationalization that allowed Thomas to execute the order was this. Civilians had 40 minutes of loudspeaker warnings in their own language. Japanese soldiers inside would shoot civilians who tried to surrender. He had seen it 7 times at Saipan. If he refused this mission, the captain would assign it to someone less careful. More explosives would be used. The cave system would collapse, killing everyone instantly, with 0 chance of survival. His method, precise charges on outer entrances only, would leave them 48 to 72 hours of air, a chance they would reconsider surrender when reality of slow death set in. He was not choosing to kill them. He was choosing the method that gave them the longest opportunity to choose life. The psychological cost began 3 nights later, recurring identical nightmares where he was inside the cave he sealed, trying to exit, but each direction he ran terminated in solid rock wall, air getting thinner, lungs burning, waking with a scream that made Rodriguez shake him, saying, "You are out. Breathe." The defense system that Iwo Jima's defenders constructed was officially designated Chikajosai, integrated multi-level underground fortification with redundant communications. For mining engineers sent from Tokyo, it was a marvel of applied geology and ventilation engineering. For Marines, it was simply the meat grinder. Tunnel system extension, 18 kilometers of interconnected underground passages, completed by February 11, 1945, with original planning predicting 27 kilometers total, a project never finalized due to necessity of diverting labor to construct coastal pillboxes imposed by the Navy. For perspective, 18 kilometers is length sufficient to connect the southern tip of Manhattan to Bronx Zoo via continuous underground tunnel. Imagine a primitive subway system, built by 5,000 men using pickaxes, shovels, and improvised explosives, working 3 8-hour shifts for 7 consecutive months, in temperatures varying from 30 to 50 Celsius, depending on proximity to active volcanic fissures, with sulfur vapors requiring gas mask use 75% of work time. Workers could endure only 5 minutes of continuous excavation before needing replacement. Progress rate: 85 meters of new tunnel per day at construction peak in September through October 1944, speed comparable to modern commercial mining projects with mechanical equipment, except this was achieved with hand tools. Installation depth varied from 3 meters for artillery positions near surface with camouflaged openings to 30 meters for Kuribayashi's main command post, located 500 meters northeast of Kita village, built with 3 reinforced concrete chambers connected by 150 meters of auxiliary tunnels. At 30 meters depth, installations were invulnerable to any conventional munition in the 1945 American arsenal. 2,000-pound bombs from Navy and Army Air Forces penetrated maximum 8 to 12 meters into porous volcanic rock before detonating, the explosion creating impressive surface craters but leaving deep structures completely intact. 3 days of naval bombardment, from February 16th through 18th preceding invasion, launched 6,800 tons of high explosive over the 21 square kilometer island, fire density of 323 tons per square kilometer, equivalent to a 250 kilogram bomb explosion every 40 square meters of surface. Documented result: 95 Japanese casualties, 0 operational kills of main underground positions. Rock composition was vitrified volcanic basalt and porous volcanic scoria, a geologically rare combination offering a perfect paradox for defenders. The scoria was soft enough to cut with hand tools, Mohs hardness of 4 to 5 comparable to sedimentary limestone, but when mixed with cement at 3:1 ratio produced concrete with compressive strength of 4,200 psi, 40% more resistant than 3,000 psi standard commercial concrete used in modern civil construction. The sulfur component in volcanic ash acted as a curing accelerator, reducing set time from 28 days to 72 hours at 25 Celsius ambient temperature. Japan had shipped 1,700 tons of Portland cement in cargo vessels between July and November 1944. Iwo Jima's garrison locally produced an additional 4,800 tons of concrete equivalent using volcanic ash, creating total capacity of 6,500 tons, sufficient to build the 135 coastal pillboxes plus 1,400 interior fortified positions. Ventilation systems comprised 1,200 natural and constructed ventilation shafts distributed through the tunnel system, with surface openings varying from 15 centimeter diameter, vertical shafts 3 to 5 meters deep, using natural formations, to 2 by 1 meter main shafts with wooden ladders for rapid vertical access. The challenge was not just providing fresh air, but removing sulfur vapors. Sulfur dioxide at concentrations above 10 parts per million causes severe respiratory irritation. Above 50 ppm, it causes pulmonary edema in 30-minute exposure. Japanese engineers created a thermal convection airflow system. Intake shafts positioned at lower elevations captured cooler, denser, fresh air. Exit shafts at higher elevations allowed warmer, less dense air with sulfur dioxide to escape through natural pressure differential. Additional ingenuity: many ventilation shafts were simultaneously firing positions. A 40 by 15 centimeter opening allowed a Type 38 rifle or Type 96 light machine gun to create flanking fire against American infantry, then be retracted into tunnel interior in less than 3 seconds when observers identified return fire. Blast doors and isolation systems: 340 steel doors installed at strategic tunnel system points, design stolen from I-400 class submarines the Imperial Navy was producing in 1944. Each door measured 1.8 meters height by 0.9 meters width, 12 millimeter steel thickness, with 8 millimeter rubber seal, permitting hermetic seal when closed and locked. Weight per door: 185 kilograms. Total installation: 62,900 kilograms of specialized steel, shipped from Yokosuka Naval Arsenal between August and October 1944 in 3 separate loads. 2 cargo ships sunk by American submarines. 3rd managed to arrive. Dual function, first contain explosion if Americans detonated explosives or threw grenades into tunnel entrance. Door absorbed overpressure and fragmentation, protecting personnel more than 8 meters away in the interior. 2nd, permit isolation of compromised sections if Americans pumped gas or gasoline, tactics known from Peleliu in September 1944. Casemated artillery positions totaled 268 pieces of 75mm or larger caliber artillery, plus 69 anti-tank guns of 37 to 47mm, installed in concrete casemates with sliding steel doors operated by rail and counterweight systems. The design was brutal in its simplicity. Artillery piece mounted on mobile platform inside concrete chamber with 1.5-meter wide opening in front face. Steel door 8mm thick, 2 meters wide, 1.8 meters high, suspended on upper rail. When time to fire, 2 men pulled cables moving door laterally in 1.2 seconds via pulley system and 200-kilogram counterweight. Cannon fired 3 to 6 rounds in 15 to 25 seconds depending on caliber. Door closed in 0.8 seconds before American observers could identify exact position for counter-battery fire. Marines described the effect as volcano spitting shells. Explosions appeared to emerge from solid rock without visible artillery flash, without durable smoke signature. Positions were virtually impossible to neutralize via counter-battery because opening was exposed only 16 to 31 seconds per fire cycle, and even direct hit on concrete face during interval, when door was closed, caused at most superficial surface spalling without interior chamber penetration. Development chronology, from conception to implementation, began May 25, 1944, Prime Minister's Office, Tokyo. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, 53 years old, commander of 2nd Imperial Guard Division since March 1944, was summoned by General Hideki Tojo and informed that the eyes of the entire nation were focused on Iwo Jima's defense, that he would defend to the last man. Kuribayashi, veteran of 33 years including service in Manchuria from 1933 through 1937 and administrative posts in Tokyo from 1937 through 1944, had never commanded large-scale combat operations. The necessity arose from a simple strategic realization. After fall of the Marianas with Saipan captured in July 1944, B-29 Superfortress bombers, based at Saipan, had 2,400-kilometer range, sufficient to hit Tokyo and return, but without margin for fighter escort. Iwo Jima, located exactly 1,200 kilometers south of Tokyo and 1,200 kilometers north of Saipan, offered a base for P-51 Mustang fighters with 2,700-kilometer range to provide complete escort. Reaction from Kuribayashi's immediate superiors, Admiral Suemu Toyoda, commander of Combined Fleet, was skeptical that an Army officer without recent combat experience could defend the island against Marines veteran of 24 victorious amphibious assaults. Initial resources allocated included 15,000 men, garrison to be expanded from 1,500, unspecified fortification budget, 6-month deadline before expected invasion in January through February 1945. The catastrophic initial bombardment came June 15 through 16, 1944, Kuribayashi's first and second days in command. Carrier Task Group 58.1 under Admiral Joseph Jocko Clark attacked Iwo Jima with 42 F-6F Hellcat fighters, 24 SB-2C Helldiver dive bombers, and 18 TBF Avenger torpedo bombers. First wave at 0615 resulted in destruction of 67 of 80 Japanese aircraft stationed at Chidori Airfield, also called Motoyama Airfield No. 1. Aircraft in open revetments were stationary targets for 50 caliber machine guns and 5-inch HVAR rockets. Second wave at 0740 demolished all permanent visible structures on the island, hangars, barracks, control tower, fuel installations. Japanese casualty count: 83 killed, 121 wounded, 89% of defensive air capacity eliminated in 94 minutes. An anonymous garrison member wrote in a captured diary that for 2 days they cowered like rats, trying to dig deeper into acrid volcanic dust and ash of Iwo Jima, never feeling so helpless, so insignificant. Then on July 4th through 5th, American naval force including battleships and cruisers bombarded the island for 48 continuous hours with virtual impunity. Japanese coastal artillery managed sporadic return fire, but inflicted no significant damage. Kuribayashi realized that surface defenses were convenient targets. Only deep underground fortifications could survive. Doctrinal conflict with Navy came August through September 1944 in multiple heated staff meetings at Kuribayashi's temporary command post near Motoyama No. 1. Navy Captain Tsunezo Wachi, Kuribayashi's predecessor as island commander, who was relieved but remained as advisor, and Admiral Rinosuke Ichimaru, commander of naval forces who arrived August 10th with 2,216 personnel, pressured Kuribayashi to build coastal defenses according to traditional Suisei Sakusen doctrine. Wachi's specific argument stated that conceding the beach without fight destroys troop morale and contradicts Bushido, that soldiers must see command, willing to spill blood on front line, not hide in tunnels. Ichimaru's argument stated that Navy loses credibility with General Staff in Tokyo if they abandon the coastal zone that had always been naval responsibility to defend. Kuribayashi responded that credibility does not stop 16-inch shells, morale does not detonate torpedoes. They would preserve force for battle where they could inflict casualties, not sacrifice men to satisfy aesthetics. Conflict escalated to Tokyo General Staff in August. Army General Staff requested opinion from Nazi Germany General Staff about waterfront defense viability under massive bombardment. Germany responded that waterline defense was unfeasible under overwhelming US shelling and bombing based on experiences in Sicily and Salerno in 1943. Despite this external validation, Kuribayashi yielded to political compromise, authorized construction of 135 concrete pillboxes along 3,200 meters of probable landing beaches in the southern sector. Construction took 3 months from July through September 1944, consuming resources. Kuribayashi estimated delayed main tunnel system completion by 6 weeks. Breakthrough in design for artillery positions with mobile doors came September 18, 1944. Major Takeshi Fujiwara, 41 years old, fortifications engineer sent from Tokyo in August, had an insight during observation of Type 3 120mm cannon firing exercise in open position near Motoyama No. 2. The problem was that exposed cannon was visible to aerial and naval observers, vulnerable to counter-battery fire, with response time of 45 to 90 seconds after first shot. Traditional solution was camouflage net and hope. Fujiwara's insight was to adapt submarine hangar design, concrete structure with sliding steel door opening only when necessary. First prototype tested September 23rd, 4x4x3 meter concrete chamber with 1.5 meter front opening, 8mm steel door mounted on upper rail, 180 kilogram volcanic rock counterweight in canvas bag. Result: door opened in 2.1 seconds, closed in 1.3 seconds. Performance numbers showed cannon could fire 4 rounds in 18 seconds before closing. Time insufficient for naval observers to identify exact fire origin through optics at 8 to 12,000 meter distances under battle conditions, with multiple explosions creating visual obscuration. Kuribayashi's reaction was immediate approval to retrofit 180 existing artillery positions, plus incorporation of design in all new construction. Total production by February 1945, 268 operational casemented positions. Tunnel system reached 50% milestone November 3, 1944. Garrison completed 9 kilometers of main tunnels plus 4 kilometers of secondary branches, 13 kilometers total, 48% of original 27-kilometer goal. Working conditions had killed 23 men, 11 from sulfur dioxide asphyxiation, 7 from heat stroke, 5 from tunnel collapse. Progress rate had accelerated from 65 meters per day in July to 85 meters per day in October as crews gained experience. Functionality test conducted November 3rd had 400 soldiers move from Mount Suribachi in the south at 166 meters elevation to defensive positions 1,800 meters north via tunnel system in 22 minutes without surface exposure. Speed equivalent to 4.9 kilometers per hour in underground conditions, illuminated only by lanterns. For comparison, infantry forced march on flat open terrain moves at 6 to 7 kilometers per hour. Movement through claustrophobic tunnel system At 70% of that speed demonstrated tactical viability. Official observers from Tokyo General Staff witnessing the test included Major General Tadashi Takaishi and Lieutenant General Hideyoshi Obata. Obata, who had commanded failed Saipan defense until death in July 1944, commented that if they had this at Saipan, Marines would have taken 6 months instead of 4 weeks. Munition and supply stockpiling from November 1944 through January 1945 saw Kuribayashi accumulate food reserves sufficient for 2.5 months for 21,000-man garrison, approximately 1.8 million individual rations. Potable water was a bigger problem than food. The island had only one natural source. Desalination was impossible with available resources, so 2.4 million liters storage capacity was created using underground concrete cisterns. Ammunition totals included 22 million rounds of small-caliber ammunition at 6.5 and 7.7 millimeters, 45,000 rounds of 75 to 150 millimeter artillery, 12,000 rockets ranging from 200 millimeters up to 250 kilogram spigot mortars. Challenge was that only one improvised dock on the east coast could accommodate cargo ships, and American submarines patrolled Ogasawara Islands with intensity. 7 of 12 cargo ships sent between August and December 1944 were sunk en route. On February 19, 1945, at 0900 hours, exactly when first wave of Marines hit beaches, the integrated defense system Kuribayashi spent 8 months constructing was about to face the most massive amphibious assault in Pacific War history. At 0640, naval bombardment began final preparation phase. Battleships USS Idaho, USS Tennessee, USS Texas cruisers, USS Pensacola, USS Indianapolis, plus 18 destroyers opened fire from ranges of 2,000 to 8,000 meters. Rate of fire from capital ships averaged 1 main battery salvo every 35 to 40 seconds, secondary batteries continuous. Combined throw weight exceeded 400 tons of high explosive per minute for 90 minutes. The island disappeared under continuous eruption of flame, smoke, and pulverized volcanic rock. From Thomas Mitchell's position in his landing vehicle tracked at 3,200 meters distance, Iwo Jima looked like the surface of the sun, incandescent with overlapping explosions, the sound not discrete detonations, but continuous roar like standing inside a blast furnace. At 0830, first wave crossed line of departure. Mitchell's stomach compressed as his LVT pitched forward, gaining speed toward the beach. Around him, 12 men from his demolition team sat in 2 rows facing each other, knees almost touching in the cramped interior. Nobody spoke. The diesel engine made conversation impossible anyway. 900 horsepower turning twin propellers that pushed the 30-ton vehicle through 3-foot swells at 7 knots. Mitchell counted seconds in his head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. At 600 Mississippi, they would hit the beach. At 450 Mississippi, they entered artillery range. At 300 Mississippi, mortar range. At 200 Mississippi, heavy machine gun range. Mitchell reached 173 Mississippi when the first shell hit the water 60 meters to port. A geyser of white water 30 meters high from a 75-millimeter round that had come from somewhere on the island that naval bombardment had supposedly neutralized. The LVT driver did not deviate course. Orders were explicit: maintain formation, maintain speed, accept casualties, get to the beach. Mitchell reached 212 Mississippi when the LVT to starboard took a direct hit. 120-millimeter high explosive, penetrating the thin armor and detonating inside. The vehicle stopped moving instantly, started settling. Marines trapped inside because the blast had jammed the rear ramp. Mitchell forced himself to look away. At 293 Mississippi, machine gun fire started, 7.7-millimeter rounds making metallic pings against the LVT's armor, most deflecting but some penetrating ventilation slits. Private William Douglas Harrison, 19 years old from Portland, Oregon, took a round through his left eye socket that killed him before his body registered pain. At 360 Mississippi, Mitchell's LVT tracks bit into volcanic sand, and they were on the beach. The rear ramp dropped. Mitchell went out first, dropping into a crouch, scanning for immediate threats. What he saw made no sense. The beach rose at a 40-degree angle for 40 meters, volcanic ash so fine and loose that every step sank to mid-calf. Men struggled up the incline like trying to climb a sand dune, gaining 2 steps forward, sliding 1 step back. Behind the first terrace, a second terrace rose another 3 meters almost vertical. Between terraces, no cover except shell craters still smoking from the bombardment, and from invisible positions somewhere inland, artillery and mortar fire arrived with mechanical precision, shells landing in regular pattern every 8 to 10 seconds, walking up and down the beach in systematic coverage. Within 90 seconds of hitting the beach, Mitchell's LVT took a 75mm hit that killed the driver and set the engine compartment on fire. Within 3 minutes, 14 of the first wave's 68 LVTs were burning or disabled. Within 7 minutes, casualties on the beach exceeded 250, and the defenders Mitchell could not see dug into positions 30 meters underground, watched through periscopes and firing slits, adjusted their aim and waited. Mitchell made it to the first terrace in 42 seconds, lungs burning from the exertion of climbing through volcanic ash at 40-degree incline while carrying 43 kilograms of equipment. He dove behind the terrace's lee, pressed his back against the volcanic sand embankment, tried to control his breathing. Rodriguez materialized next to him, flamethrower tanks on his back making him look hunchbacked. Rodriguez's face was gray with volcanic ash, except for tracks of clean skin where sweat ran down. He did not speak, just held up his right hand showing 4 fingers, folded thumb, universal signal for 4 minutes until next wave arrives. Mitchell nodded. The plan called for first wave to establish beachhead, clear initial obstacles, suppress visible enemy positions. Second wave would exploit the gap, push inland. Mitchell scanned the terrain inland. Scattered shell holes, pulverized vegetation, broken concrete from destroyed pillboxes, and nothing else. No visible enemy, no muzzle flashes. Artillery rounds continued arriving with that mechanical regularity, but Mitchell could not identify firing positions. The Japanese were shooting from underground positions with overhead cover, opening firing ports only long enough to shoot, closing them before counter-battery fire could respond. At 4 minutes 30 seconds, second wave arrived. 68 more LVTs disgorging 1,360 more Marines into the killing zone. Casualties started immediately. Mitchell watched a second wave Marine take 3 steps up the beach incline before a mortar round landed 2 meters to his left. Fragmentation took his legs off it,